Oh, you don't want to. Wow. So this is a brand new experience for us. So I'm welcoming a room of a dozen or so people in person, which is heartwarming because we have not been able to be in person for a very long time. And clearly we're also only partly in person because many of you have also joined by Zoom. My name is Kathy Hoffman, and I'm sort of emceeing this evening. I'm part of the Cambridge El Salvador Sister City project. And I mostly get to introduce people and say thank you. And so let me begin with the thank yous. Thank you to this church, St. James Church. It's the first time we've been in this space. Maybe at the end, we'll flip the screen around so you can see how gorgeous this space is. And then I want to particularly thank Anne Shumway, who's a member of this church, who facilitated our being here. And would really like to go to El Salvador, but now she's feeling at age 90 that it's too much. So she's doing everything she can locally. So thank you to Anne. And I want to thank both the Arlington and the Cambridge sister cities who have, for all this history and also for all the organizing tonight. You'll hear a little bit about that. I want to recognize our comrade, former consulate of New England, Jose Alaman, who's with us. Thank you for being here, Jose. People can clap and stuff. Kind of weird. And then mostly I want to thank Zulma and Lorena. And there will be, you know, these times of still COVID are hard. It's hard for people to travel. It's hard for people to get here. They have made that effort. And also, mostly I'm thanking them because the work they're doing in El Salvador is hard. And it's been made very hard by this current context that you will hear much more about from them. But we have known each other, Lorena and Cambridge, El Salvador Sister City, we have known each other since 1987. And so it's just heartwarming to be able to have you here in this city. And we're at St. James Church, partly because it's the closest to Arlington, so that we're bridging the gap. We're going to hear a few words about the Cambridge Sister City, a few words about Arlington. A few words about Arlington, and then we'll have about 40 minutes for the presentation from Lorena and Zulma, at the end of which there'll be plenty of time for questions from Zoomers and from people in person. And I think that's it. And so as long as I've known, oh, no, we're doing Zoom. So we have a big question and a little teaching for you. And so because that's part of the importance of intergenerational organizing, Carly, who is a member of the Sisters, U.S. El Salvador Sister Cities, is our Zoom moderator, and she's going to say a few words.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carly, Me llamo Carly, and I was a volunteer in 2016. I lived in the community of Chatcon, which is sistered with Binghamton, New York. And I'm really excited to be here with all of you and be here with all of you virtually as well. If people have questions on Zoom, I'll be handling that and fielding those questions into our live space here.
Also to encourage, a lot of names are familiar to some of us in the chat, and we're happy to see Louise and Patty and Hillary and others, but if you'd be willing to just in the chat, say a message of hello and your name and where you are calling from so that we get to know who's here. So, and so I want to introduce, wanting to introduce, as long as I've known Lorena, adding another 10, 15 years to that, I want to introduce my longtime sister, comrade, Nancy Ryan, who has been with the El Salvador Sister City Project when she was the director of the Women's Commission. And I was at the Peace Commission. We helped found the project. And she's going to just speak for a few minutes about the Cambridge Project. Please welcome Nancy.
Perfect. It's so great to see everyone on Zoom and here in the room, and thank you for coming to Cambridge. What am I? Oh. Thank you all for coming to Cambridge. I think pretty much people know that our project kind of got it going with informal delegations in 1986 when the war was raging. And in 1987, we formalized our relationship with the city council through Mario Dava of wonderful memory, and became a formal sister city. And in that way, we were able to send a formal delegation in 1987 during the war. And Kathy and I were the highest ranking city officials on the delegation. So we got to kind of negotiate with the Salvadoran government. But it's been a heartwarming experience. We have taken, I don't know, 100 people at least to El Salvador, would you say? We have taken teachers, we've taken students, and yesterday, our delegates from El Salvador and Kathy and Rachel met with young people and teachers at Ringen Latin and are encouraging them to join a delegation. And I want to be sure that we let you know, we haven't had official delegations since 2016. We tried to have one almost every year, and we have until in 2016 didn't work out, and then COVID hit. And so we are going to have a delegation in April, and we would love to hear from any of you who might be interested in going. And there's a form that you can fill out if you'd like to be part of the delegation. Is there one up on the table, Cap? Or some up on the, oh, right there. And since that's right next to the coffee and the cashews, buying the coffee and the cashews supports the efforts of CRIPDES, our sister organization in El Salvador, which you'll hear more about. So I think that's pretty much all you need to know from us, but we'd love to have you join us for any kinds of future activities and delegations. So thank you so much.
And I want to then introduce our other partner in solidarity, Elizabeth Dre, who there was a partnership with Arlington back, and then it kind of began to fizzle a little bit, and then it has really been reborn with enormous amounts of efforts and activities. And so please welcome Elizabeth Dre from Arlington.
Hola, muy buenas noches. It's nice to see everybody here and here. I'm really glad that we can gather both in person and try this whole, hybrid situation so that we can be more inclusive. My name is Elizabeth Dre. I am a volunteer with the Arlington Teosinte Sister City Project. We celebrated 34 years of hermanamiento, of sisterhood, this last August. As Kathy said, we have been working very hard to sort of reinvigorate the sistering relationship, and we have found that our sweet spot of focus on was more of a cultural and educational exchange. So we have a school curriculum in Arlington Public Schools. It starts in 2nd grade, and there's touch points for the curriculum through middle school and in the high school. We also work on supporting local jobs in Teosinte through the amazingly skilled and talented women of the Women's Sewing Cooperative, who make these beautiful crafts that we are able to sell and return 100% of the profits to the community to provide becas or scholarships for education. And our most recent success is that after years of struggling to replace their water system in Teosinte and having had many promises been broken, most recently with the current government, they turned to us and we were able to do a special fundraiser and raise $10,000 so that they could replace the pipes in the village. They had rusted, they were full of lead and E. coli. And so that was a great effort. And I'm really grateful to the Arlington community for pulling together and really supporting our brothers and sisters in Teosinte and for that access to clean water, which is a basic human right that we should all have. Speaking of the schools, I was fortunate today. I spent the entire day with Carly and Zulma and Lorena in the Arlington High School. I want to thank the Spanish teachers there, the Spanish department, the world language department, who welcomed us with open arms. We spoke to about 400 young people today. It was presentations were bilingual. We had just some great questions from the youth. We made some really great connections with the teachers, and it just feels very hopeful to feel all that great energy. So having said that, I want to make our introductions. I want to introduce Zulma Tobar, who is over here, and you'll see her here. So Zulma is an El Salvador staff person with the sister cities. She has a personal history in the organized community of Sinquera and works on issues of education, environmental justice, advocacy, and community organizing with the rural communities through U.S. El Salvador sister cities and CRIPTES. So she will be up here soon. You can't see her, but I can. And I'm also thrilled to introduce Lorena Araujo. Did I? Yeah, superstar. She is the current president. We should so honor the current president of CRIPTES, and she has been an organizer since the age of 16, and it's extremely inspiring with her work. So CRIPTES, for those of you who don't know what it is the leading movement group in El Salvador for organizing the rural communities. And so they organize the sister cities communities in El Salvador. She got involved in the 80s during the war. She got involved with displaced persons and has continued to be part of different decision-making spaces, promoting the defense of human rights, community organizing, and environmental justice. And I have had just a fabulous time having you guys here, and I'm going to pass it on. Thank you so much.
Hola, hola, buenas noches. Hello, everyone. Gracias. So we are very happy to be here one more time, sharing with you all. As Elizabeth said, we have been meeting with the students and they had great questions for us. And we are also very surprised that many of them knew about El Salvador and what's going on. So we are very, very happy to have had that opportunity. Esta noche, tonight, we want to share with you some experiences that we have had and that we have heard from our people in our communities about the current reality, the current context that we are facing, that we are going through in El Salvador. Because most of the time people get only what some employees get through the mass media. Y por eso tonight I want to ask what you have heard about El Salvador. ¿Qué han escuchado del Salvador?
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, ajá. La moneda.
Knows the president.
Ah, everybody knows the president. Ajá, ¿qué más?
Is that true?
No.
Loves the president.
No.
Ah, loves the president. Ajá. If you say that I'm from El Salvador, everyone says, Bukele.
So online, we have COVID lockdown and coolest, quote unquote, coolest dictator from our compañera Beth.
¿Qué más? What else have you heard? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so tonight we want to have kind of a conversation. We have a PowerPoint presentation for you to have some graphics, some pictures of what we are living in El Salvador, but we want to have a conversation with you. So feel free to have or to raise your hand if you have questions, and also for reactions. We are very happy to hear your reactions regarding what we are sharing with you. And now I'm going to let Lorena come here and share some of the work that Cryptes is doing and what we are experiencing in El Salvador.
Bueno, buenas noches a todos y todas y a quienes nos están siguiendo por esta cámara. Es un gusto estar con ustedes, volverles a ver y ver sus rostros muy alegres. Así que yo también estoy contenta de verles.
It's a great pleasure to be here with you and see your beautiful faces. And I'm just very happy to be here.
Creo que vamos a tener un rato de esta noche así muy dinámico, esperando contar con la participación de ustedes y con que no se aburran, porque hablar de El Salvador es hablar de la actualidad que vive el pueblo salvadoreño.
We hope to have a very dynamic evening, have a lot of interchange, and because speaking about El Salvador is something very special.
Y hoy estamos aquí hablando de Cryptes porque es una organización que junto a Ciudades Hermanas hemos hecho un trabajo de construir comunidad, de construir y promover la solidaridad, los valores y promover los derechos que tienen las personas en materia de derechos humanos, que son todos los derechos.
So I'm here to speak about Cryptes, which is an organization that works closely with U.S. El Salvador sister cities. And we have the same principles and values of solidarity and working for defending human rights.
Si algo nos gusta de hablar de Cryptes y de Ciudades Hermanas, es que mantenemos ese trabajo de organización, de movilización y de lucha, pese a las condiciones que tenemos hoy en día en El Salvador.
So Cryptes and sister cities works together for organizing, for mobilizing, and for struggling for against the situation that the people are facing, the difficulties that we're facing in El Salvador.
Son 38 años de organización y lucha promoviendo los derechos humanos de Cryptes y 36 con Ciudades Hermanas.
38 years Cryptes has been working for this, and 36 sister cities working for human rights and the right for justice.
Y de esto es un trabajo en 7 departamentos de los 14 que tiene el país, con 300 comunidades rurales.
So we work in 7 of the departments. There are 14 in total in El Salvador, and in 300 different communities in the rural areas.
Esto nos da el derecho a hablar de todo lo que hemos podido avanzar y lograr en estos 38 años de organización y de lucha en defensa de los derechos humanos.
So we certainly have had a lot of experience working in all these communities in these 38 years, defending human rights.
Pero también nos da el derecho de decir que nos preocupa la situación actual en el país.
So it gives us also the right to say that we are very concerned with the current situation in El Salvador.
Ya que desde el 84 que surge Cryptes trabajando porque la población que fue desplazada, que fue refugiada por el conflicto armado, regresara al país, hiciera vida normal en el país y se incorporara para seguir luchando y llegar a los acuerdos de paz.
So in 1984, Cryptes was founded for the displaced people of El Salvador. They were internal refugees, and continued working for the rights of these people, the refugees or the displaced people, who then formed their communities. And currently, we're now still working with these communities who are now facing different kinds of struggles.
Y esos acuerdos de paz nos dieron la posibilidad de avanzar en el conocimiento de derechos, en el que se reconocieran y se aplicaran en materia para las mujeres, para los jóvenes, para la salud, para la educación.
So the war, as you know, was 1980, 1992, and CRIPTUS was founded in 84, continued working during the war until the peace accords, which was 1992. And then since then, working for the rights of women, youth, the farm workers and workers in factories.
Y en organizarnos libremente,
And to be able
movilizarnos
to
libremente.
organize in a freely and to have unions and organizations that are respected.
Lamentablemente, en el 2019 ocurre un fenómeno.
So unfortunately, in 2019, a certain phenomenon occurred.
Y el fenómeno es que un hombre joven llegó a convencer a la población salvadoreña para que votaran por él, y hoy ostenta el poder completamente. El poder ejecutivo, el legislativo y el judicial.
So the phenomenon of 2019 was the election of the new president, a very young man who had control of all the social media and knew how to really get people to follow him. And he's taken control of the three branches of government, the legislative, well, the executive, which is he, the legislative, and the judicial.
Y esta imagen es muy representativa para demostrar el poderío, el militarismo, la imposición y el no importarle irse a meter a un recinto que es la Asamblea Legislativa, donde no se puede entrar armado, pero entró.
So this is the national legislature, is like our Congress, our Hall of Congress, and here he has the military entering. They're not allowed to come in with weapons, but he had them come in, showing his power.
Entonces, todos aquellos que creyeron que el hombre joven, el hombre guapo, el hombre estudiado, el hombre que hablaba inglés es un dictador.
So we would never have thought that this young man who was elected in 2019, young, handsome, studied, or he spoke English perfectly, and here he became a dictator.
Así que esto es lo preocupante hoy en día en El Salvador.
This is the most challenging and concerning situation that we have in El Salvador.
Porque aquello que nos costó tanta sangre, tanta lágrima, tantas masacres, tanto trabajo en defensa de los derechos humanos, lo lleva para atrás.
So we struggled so hard for during those 12 years of civil war, the blood and the tears and the massacres of thousands and thousands of people. And then finally having the peace accords. And then a few years later to end up with a dictator.
Al grado que hoy nos tiene con un estado de excepción.
So right now we're under what's called the state of exception.
Con la disposición de que es para capturar a todos los pandilleros, delincuentes, que han cometido delitos y hay que llevarlos a la cárcel.
So ostensibly, it is because of all the gangs. You've probably heard about gangs in El Salvador, to be able to capture anybody who has anything to do with the gangs for to make sure that there's safety in the streets.
Y ese no sería
And
el
they're put in
problema.
jail.
Porque si son delincuentes y han cometido delitos, pues que vayan a pagarlos con la ley. El punto es que se están llevando a las personas inocentes, a muchos jóvenes y a muchas personas adultas mayores que tienen enfermedades crónicas y han ido a parar a la cárcel, y de esto ya murieron 53.
So you might think, well, they're gang members and they're criminals. They should be captured and taken to jail. And that's possibly true. I'm adding here, but they're not given trials. But they're not only taking people who are definitely gang members, they're taking innocent people, people who have chronic health conditions, and they're stuck in these jails with many, many people, and they're not given the medicine they need. And already over 50 people have died.
Entonces hoy hablar de El Salvador es hablar de pensar si anda en la calle, pensar para dónde va, porque está sometido a los registros que le registren las carteras, los bolsos, el teléfono, y si ven que ahí hay algo sospechoso, se llevan a ese joven, o se llevan a esa mujer, o se llevan a ese señor.
So when you go out in the street in El Salvador, you have to be very clear where you are and what you're carrying with you. Because you could be stopped at any time and they're taking young people just because they have some suspicion of being connected to the gangs.
Hoy los soldados andan en los buses y los policías también andan en los buses.
So the soldiers and the police are out in full force on the streets and in the buses.
Y tenemos el caso de un empresario que se le ocurrió dar una opinión. Y entonces hoy está preso y le quitaron las unidades de transporte. Y esas andan al servicio del gobierno, llevando a la gente.
So the buses in El Salvador are actually owned by business people. They might have one or two bus routes, and then it's a public transportation. So one of the bus owners decided to express his opinion that he didn't think it was correct what was happening. He lost his bus and his bus route.
Ese es un mensaje para decirles, si todos ustedes van a andar movilizando gente, el día que se les ocurre una manifestación, irán a la cárcel.
And also the bus drivers then received this message that if they're going to be carrying people who are going to the demonstrations and the marches, who are marching against the government, they might lose their buses too.
Y como si eso es poquito, ¿verdad? Inventó la ley del Bitcoin para quitarle el dinero también al Estado y empezar a jugar con ese dinero que hoy ya bajó y ya perdió. Pero ¿quién perdió? Nosotros. Él no ha perdido nada. Él tiene esa ley para, como decimos nosotros, chiviar con el dinero del pueblo.
La ley del Bitcoin.
No está ahí.
So in the economy and the way, the place that the government money is being invested has also, of course, Bukele has complete control over everything. So he's playing around with the money that's supposed to be for social services and putting it in other places. Yeah.
Pero como él se adjudica tener el poder para la ley, la oficina administrativa es la Asamblea Legislativa y el Poder Judicial está ahí en función de hacer lo que él le dice. Si un juez se le opone, ya lo despidió, ¿verdad? Y por dos razones lo despidió. Uno, porque tenían conocimiento y estaban llevando adelante casos como la masacre del Mozote, la masacre del Zumpul y otros casos. Entonces, eso ya se fueron. Pero también por viejos, les digo. Ya tienen 60 años, ya váyanse, los voy a jubilar. Y voy a poner a los jóvenes, que son los que están al servicio de él.
So he has control of the legislative branch. He can decide what laws pass and don't. And he has control of the judicial branch. And the judges that were there before his election were seeing cases and figuring out who was guilty and what the consequences were going to be in many of the massacres, like the massacre of El Mozote and the Zumpul River. He said enough of that. He took out these judges supposedly because they were too old, and he put in young judges who would be very obedient to him.
Y también jubiló a aquellos policías que eran oficiales, que tenían conocimiento de la ley y del respeto a los derechos humanos. Eso también ya les digo, ustedes ya están viejos, váyanse.
And also the police officers who were officials, who were officers and had experience and knew how the National Civilian Police was supposed to function. They're out because of their age. And he put in young people, again, his people.
Y estamos a punto de que también nacionalice las pensiones de los jubilados. O sea, que las nacionalice, que las haga, que agarre el dinero de los pensionados para su servicio.
So those who had worked for the state and had retired were supposed to receive their pensions. Now he's taking these pensions and he's nationalizing them and using them in the way he wants.
Entonces, este tiene todas las características de un dictador.
These are all the characteristics of a dictator.
Y para sorprender más todavía, el 15 de septiembre en una cadena televisiva dijo, yo me voy a reelegir.
And even more surprising, on the 15th of September, which is the Independence Day celebration, he got on television and he declared that he's going to be re-elected president.
Para eso está reformando la Constitución de la República.
So he's reforming the Constitution,
la cual no permite ni un día más a un presidente que terminó su periodo de 5 años, pero este lo va a hacer.
Because right now, the Constitution says that the president can only serve 5 years, not 1 day more, but this president is changing that.
Así que ese es el presidente de hoy en El Salvador, un hombre que sabe manejar los teléfonos, la tecnología, ¿verdad? Sabe tuitear, que ahorita se le ocurre pedir agua, la va a pedir por un tuit. ¿ya? Y
So
se la
this is
lleva.
our president now, a young man who knows how to handle all the social media, uses phone, and knows how to tweet. He actually governs by Twitter.
Y hablando de agua, también hay una ley que privatiza el agua,
And speaking of water, there is a law now that's privatizing water.
que se peleó 15 años porque eso no sucediera, pero ya sucedió. Y en eso quiero decirles que también en esa lucha por el agua fui detenida en el 2007.
So I'd like to speak just a little bit about that because we've had a struggle for 15 years to prevent the privatization of water. And in fact, I was one of the people who was arrested in 2007 when there was a demonstration against the privatization.
Me acusaron de terrorista, me mandaron a la cárcel
They accused me of being a terrorist. They sent me to prison.
y seguimos luchando por eso, pero este lo logró, ¿verdad? Hizo una ley para privatizar el agua.
And we continued struggling for keeping the water as the right of all the people, but he now has declared privatization.
Entonces yo siento mucho decirles, hablarles de desgracia, pero esa es la realidad que tiene el país después de que nosotros habíamos creído que respirábamos, ¿verdad? Para alentar los buenos esfuerzos que hemos venido haciendo, pero hoy estamos en un contexto que nos pone al frente a seguir una lucha que es tediosa, una lucha que tenemos que saber cómo hacerla y tenemos que saber cómo enfrentarla para no perder todo lo que,
So
o lo poco que queda.
I'm very sorry that I have to tell you all these awful things that are going on in my country, but this is the way it is. And this is the struggle that we have to face. And this is what we have to continue to work together to change.
Yo me quedo hasta aquí para que hagamos el conversatorio y veamos qué podemos hacer.
I'd like to open it up to questions or comments.
We received an online question. Is it okay if we go to that one really quick? Okay, what are conditions in the countryside, schools, healthcare, housing? ¿Cuáles son las condiciones en los campos
En el
y las escuelas, en los hospitales, con la salud y la vivienda?
Thank you, Patty Natick. for that question. And
Yes,
we're-
to give a shout out. Thank you, Patty.
Should we give a few questions and then have a, just put out a few questions? Or just go, okay, las condiciones en el campo, salud, vivienda, educación.
Bueno, la verdad que esos son los derechos que deberían de estar en plena luz del día cumpliéndose. Pero esa es la escasez que hoy tenemos, la escasez en salud, que por lo menos antes logramos tener que los hospitales tuvieran medicina. Hoy al paciente le da la receta para que vaya y la compre. Las unidades de salud, que son las clínicas que están cercanas a la gente, tampoco tienen medicina. Antes habían por lo menos las acetaminofén, pero hoy últimamente ya ni esas están. Entonces,
So,
ese es un retroceso.
Those three areas, the housing, the healthcare and education, were what we struggled for, what the peace accords were about, and what we continue to struggle for all these years. And now, even that we don't have. For example, in healthcare, incredible scarcity. People go to the doctor or the clinic and they get their prescription and they go to fill out the prescription and there's no medicine there, not even ibuprofen or acetaminophen.
Y en educación, a la Universidad de El Salvador le reducieron el presupuesto con 12 millones menos para los estudiantes de la universidad.
And in education, for example, in the National University, they reduced the budget by $12 million.
Pero sí lo aumentaron para la Fuerza Armada,
And they took the 12 million and gave it to the armed forces
porque hay que tener el control territorial.
in order to have control over the territory.
Tienen que cuidar el que la gente no se mueva, no hable, y si acaso hace eso, pues que lo vayan a buscar.
They have to make sure that people don't move, don't talk. And if they do, they have to have the armed forces there to take them away.
See, there's another question.
We can,
But can
let's
we-
go here and then we'll go online and then we'll
Yeah.
go back here,
I think
okay?
it's good to recognize we have a wonderful audience here and it's great that you've all come in person too. I really appreciate it.
I'm just wondering, just so you all can also have a sense for a moment.
Ma? Oh, it's actually, it's not, oh yeah. There are other,
So, is it question, Sunny?
So, my question's gonna back you up a little. All over the world, I think we see countries that had been moving progressively backslide and elect right-wing dictatorial people. So I think it's a common phenomenon. I wonder what you think the dynamics were in El Salvador that led Bukele to be elected. So I think trading those kind of analysis is helpful to resolve.
Ujú. Entonces, en muchas partes del mundo, casi en todo el mundo, hay muchas situaciones así, donde han tenido progreso, han tenido gobiernos progresistas y después han elegido derechistas. Es un cambio. ¿Y por qué eso pasó en El Salvador? ¿Cuáles son las condiciones que llegaron el pueblo a elegir un hombre como él?
Bueno, ese es un factor. Ustedes conocen la historia de El Salvador, que pasamos por, voy a hablar de la historia más reciente, por 60 años de dictadura militar.
So we had 60 years of military dictatorship.
Y muchos antes de nosotros vinieron luchando con eso. Habían elecciones y siempre se elegía a un general o a un coronel.
There were elections, it was democratic, but they were always electing generals or colonels.
La verdad es que no era la gente la que votaba, votaba el soldado, porque le quitaba la papeleta al que iba a votar y la marcaba él, entonces ganaba un general.
So usually it wasn't even the people who voted, it was the soldier who was watching over the voting, and they would take the ballot and mark it and put it in the box.
Y cuando vinieron civiles, era la derecha la que gobernaba también, porque pasamos 20 años con gobiernos de derecha.
And then we had 20 years of civilian presidents, but they were right-wing presidents.
Y es hasta el 2009 que se logra llegar a la presidencia con un gobierno de izquierda.
So in 2009 was the first time we were able to elect a left-wing president.
Y después, los otros 5 años, hasta el 19, el otro gobierno de izquierda.
And then the next time, after 5 years, there was another election of a different president came in, also from the left.
Pero eso no fue tener el poder, pues. Eso fue ir a gobernar el sistema que se tenía.
But this didn't mean complete power. These presidents had to govern the way the government had been set up.
Porque las correlaciones en la Asamblea Legislativa eran más de derecha que de izquierda.
Because in the Legislative Assembly, there were more right-wing members than left.
Y en el gobierno también quedó mucha gente de la derecha gobernando con la izquierda.
And there were all over the country in the government, there were more people on the right than the left.
Entonces los pueblos son así, de repente quieren radicalmente o todo o nada.
So this is the way people elect, they change the president.
Entonces los procesos democráticos nos llevan a eso.
Yeah, and the democratic process has these changes.
Promovimos la democracia y hoy tenemos un dictador electo por el pueblo.
And so because of the democratic process, the people elected somebody who turns out to be a dictator.
Es parte de los procesos,
It's part of the process.
¿verdad? Nos equivocamos
Made a mistake
o se equivocan,
or they make a mistake,
¿verdad? Pero nos condenan a todos.
but this condemns everybody.
Entonces hoy el descontento de muchos dijo que iba a resolver con este hombre joven.
So people were not pleased with what was happening and they said, well, what are we going to do with this young man.
Unos resentidos y otros contentos fueron al encuentro de él.
Some were very unhappy and wanted change, and others were happy and thought, oh, wow, here's a great possibility. So they voted for him.
Hoy están arrepentidos, pero ya lo tenemos ahí.
But many people now are repentant and they wish they hadn't, but he's the president.
Entonces, la democracia otra vez es así, ¿verdad? Podemos tener uno de derecha o podemos tener uno de izquierda o podemos tener uno que no lo conocemos, pero en ese creemos.
So this is the way democracy is. We can have a person on the left, person on the right, or someone we don't even know. And that's what happens.
Entonces, esa prueba y error nos está costando lo que nos está costando hoy.
So it's sort of trial and error, and now it's costing us a lot.
Yeah, I just. Do you have any sense of who people thought they were elected?
Usted sabe qué pensaba la gente que estaban, qué tipo de personas estaban eligiendo cuando lo eligieron a él. ¿Qué tenían en su mente qué tipo de persona era Bukele cuando lo eligieron? Derecha, izquierda, medio.
Vaya, viene la turma.
I just want to share something that we heard yesterday from the mouth, de la boca of the Salvadorans that we met yesterday that live here. And they were saying something very interesting, that many people believe in Bukele, what he was saying, because they were disappointed for politicians that were ruling El Salvador for many years. So they believed that, and they had hope to see something different, to see something different. And that led us to what we are facing in El Salvador. And something that we have been sharing with the students and with the people yesterday, and we heard testimonies of relatives of people that have been in prison, the innocent people, that also this state of exception, this state of emergency is leaving our communities without young people. They are fleeing their homes, they are fleeing their communities because they are scared of police officers, of military forces to be detained. And that's why they take the risk to come to United States, even though they know how difficult it is. So I wanted to add just that comment, that I think it's very important to think about that, how people, how Salvadorans were disappointed about the roles of different politicians and how they were, like ruling the country.
We have here.
Well, sorry, there was an online question we were gonna do, and then we had a question back here, and then we can add you to the docket if that's okay. So the question online is from, let me go back to it just a moment. It's from Otto Mejia. What are the conditions for journalists and newspapers? Have there been crackdowns?
Okay. Las condiciones para los periodistas y si han recibido, si están reprimidos.
Sí.
Well, periodistas means that everybody who works for the media. Right?
Los periodistas que intentan decir la verdad, sacar una noticia que no es la que está de acuerdo con el presidente, son expulsados del país o son amenazados para que no sigan hablando. Y ustedes deben de saber esta información.
So some journalists who have spoken out and written about positions against the government have been told to leave, have been removed. Salvadoreños.
200 periodistas tiene casa presidencial para
But
que
the
divulguen las mentiras que hacen.
presidential house or palace has 200 journalists working for him. And they're the ones that put out the media.
Los medios de comunicación están para decir lo que él quiere oír, no
So
para la verdad que la gente quiere saber.
the media just puts out exactly what Bukele wants people to know, not what people necessarily would like to have as in the news.
Entonces, hacer una denuncia hoy en día en El Salvador, no hay lugar a donde hacerlo.
So there's no place really to publish anything in El Salvador against the regime.
O sea, si va a la asamblea a pedir algo, es para que vaya al bote de la basura. Si va a la Corte Suprema de Justicia, es para que quede ahí empapelado. Y
So-
si va a los medios de comunicación, es para que no lo divulguen.
So if you go to the legislature or to the Supreme Court or to the media people and ask for something, it just goes into the wastebasket,
Esa es la realidad.
reality. So. question?
We have a question back here and then we'll go over here.
I'm just wondering, people when you ask a question, just say your name. The ones online, we know the names, but not the ones sitting here, so. Yeah. Gracias.
Government, what do you think with the drug, the people who control the drugs, is that what is going on? Drug trade.
The drug cartels, yeah. Whatever.
What do you think the involvement of the drug cartels with the government
Sí, hay una conexión con el gobierno.
and what is the
Okay.
result?
We'll translate it, but also that Carly was putting the questions in the chat for people who want to see them.
Oh, very excellent. Okay, entonces, así hay una conexión y cómo manejar eso.
Eso es una presunción, ¿verdad? Es así como que se dice, pero ¿quién lo comprueba?
It's an assumption, a possibility, but how do we prove it?
Pero, pues, al verse la situación que está pasando, ¿quién lo puede dudar?
To see the situation that we're in, who can doubt it?
Audio is asking questions. Beyond.
So the question was, is there a connection between the big drug cartels, the narcotraficantes, and the government?
Role, what is the role of the United States?
Oh, the role of the United States. El papel de los Estados Unidos en eso. Sorry, I missed the second.
Bueno, el papel de Estados Unidos no lo sé que tenga que ver con eso, ¿verdad? Lo único que sabemos es que no hay embajadora ni embajador de Estados Unidos en El Salvador. Hay un encargado de negocios.
So the role of the United States, I don't know, but all I can say is there is no ambassador from the United States in El Salvador. There is somebody who controls business.
Y la otra cosa es que la asesoría que tuvo este tipo fue la asesoría de Trump. Y fue un buen alumno porque lo aprendió a hacer bien.
La asesoría
De Trump.
no, que él aprendió. Yeah. So actually, Bukele studied the situation in the United States when Trump was president, and he was a very good student.
So we had a question here then, right?
Yes. From what I understand, the state of emergency that came into play was after a weekend of where there was a lot of murders that was ascribed to these gang members. And at first, it was people who were kind of supporting and popular, it was a popular move. My question is, has it affected safety as far as gang kind of activity in the streets go? And do people feel good about that? Because as Jose Alemán said, I saw a statistic that said 90% of the people, love Bukele.
Mhm.
So what do you think of this?
So, entonces, cuando pusieron el estado de excepción fue después de un fin de semana de muchos homicidios y la gente estaba a favor.
Sí.
Y ahora, ¿qué opina la gente? Porque supuestamente 90% están a favor de Bukele.
I say,
Oh, you don't think the voice is carried? Oh, so the question was,
Well,
can you say?
since the state of exception, right, you were saying
Oh,
that
yeah.
a lot of gang members have been picked up, correct?
well, I think that was the reason given.
The
for
weekend.
That was
state
the
of
reason,
exception.
all weekend where there was a lot of murders. That was the reason given for the state of exception. And then what did you say after that?
Well, what I said after that is, first of all, has it increased safety in the streets? And is that one
Oh,
of the
yes.
reasons for this guy still being popular?
Okay.
I'm trying to.
Must have
So
understand.
wondering the connection between that and if it has actually increased safety in the streets and if that's part of the reason why this guy's so popular. And I think you had also said before that that you had heard a statistic of about 90% of people are very pleased with Bukele.
And that's a survey I saw.
We'll have a survey that she saw. Okay.
Entonces,
Thank
sí hay
you.
más seguridad.
Hay más de 50,000 personas que han sido detenidas y encarceladas.
So over 50,000 people have been arrested and put in prison.
Y de esos, pues la mayoría se dice son pandilleros.
They say that the majority of them, or all of them, were gang members.
Y está haciendo una cárcel grande para meter 50,000 más.
And they're now constructing a new prison to put 50,000 more.
Ya destruyó 40 manzanas de cultivo que tenía la gente en el municipio de Tecoluca para construir la cárcel, que ya va encaminada.
And in the Department of San Vicente, Tecoluca is the area, they've taken 40 manzanas, which is about 40 hectares,
Hectáreas.
something like that. And they've destroyed all the farms there to build this prison.
Entonces, está decidido a meter a la gente a la cárcel.
So he's decided he's going to put more people in prison.
Es evidente que si en esa calle anda un patrullaje de soldados con policías, no vamos a ver a un delincuente.
So in the street, if there's a patrol of police officers there or soldiers there, you're not going to see any delinquents.
Entonces, ¿a costa de qué? ¿Verdad?
So what is this costing us?
Y eso es lo que ve un ciudadano que vive en Estados Unidos, salvadoreño que va a El Salvador.
So a Salvadoran who lives here and goes to visit El Salvador, that's what they see. There's no crime in the streets.
Y dice, yo alquilé un carro, fui a la playa, fui a otro lado, anduve bien, no vi nada, está la seguridad está bien.
Person said, I rented a car, I went to the beach, I went to here and there and all these lovely places. Didn't see any problems, didn't see any crime. Everything's fine.
Y si alguien dice que va de Estados Unidos, pues entonces hasta le dan protección, porque hay que cuidarle.
See, I wouldn't-
Si tú vas de aquí
Yeah,
para
oh,
allá,
and so if somebody from the US goes to El Salvador, they're going to be protected. They're not going to have any problems with crime.
entonces es evidente que el testimonio que va a llegar a cualquier lugar es que todo está bien.
So the testimony or the witnesses are going to come back saying, everything's fine, everything's perfect.
Que si la gente se siente mal por eso, sí. Hemos visto mucha gente llorando por sus hijos afuera de los centros penales porque no solo es que se lo llevan, es que la gente tiene que tener dinero para mantener a ese detenido que está en la cárcel y pagar un paquete que vale $200 porque ahí va la comida, va la ropa, va la medicina.
So you may wonder if people feel bad about the situation, and many people do, because their young people or family members have been taken and put in prison, and the mothers or the relatives are out there crying because they can't see them, they can't get them any support, and they have to pay for a minimum, it's $80, but to actually have food and medicine and clothing, it's $200 a month for them to have any kind of service in this prison.
Just, I want to ask you all if you think that police officers and armed forces, like if they treat people the same way, it doesn't matter where people are, if they are in the rural area, in a wealthy neighborhood, or
Here in the United States.
in El Salvador, like with the state of exception. You think they treat, for example, young people the same way, like one rural or campesino boy the same way that like someone that lives in a wealthy neighborhood? ¿Por qué no? Why not?
They would assume that the wealthy boy is not a gang member, right?
Yeah.
I would say that more than that, it's not that the wealthy person is not a gang member, it's that they're not a threat.
So in the audience has said it's not that the wealthy person isn't a gang member, it's just that they're not a threat.
The communities that have been organized are the rural communities. Those are the people who come together to confront the power
right? Majority, not the wealthier people who everything's going well for. So that's who we need to crack down on.
Offer that information. Do you want her to?
To the chat or
Wait a
in
minute.
person?
Okay, then
So
let's put you
Kathy
on.
just handed me a note that says contact. 100,000 people is 1.5% of the population, 6.5 million of El Salvador. If in US, 330 million, that would be 5 million people in prison.
I think that. Because of these 50,000, 56,000 in prison currently, El Salvador is a per capita higher place to put people in jail, higher than the US. Number one is El Salvador, number two is the US.
La tasa en El Salvador es más alta que en Estados Unidos, que es el per cápita más alto en el mundo. Ahora es So I'll repeat the comment is that the 56,000 in El Salvador is higher per capita than in the United States. And the United States is the highest per capita of people in prison, right? So now El Salvador is the highest in the world.
Thank you for that.
So just the last question. So what do you make of this survey that talks about how popular he is? Which Jose, you referred to kind of jokingly. I don't understand.
There's a survey that says that Bukele is popular, about 90% of the people approve of him. ¿Qué opinas de la encuesta que dice 90% están a favor de Bukele?
Sí, lo que pasa es que eso también es una encuesta engañosa, es una publicidad engañosa.
It's a deceptive, what do you call it?
Él tiene,
Survey. It's a deceptive survey. It's actually deceiving. It's not done in really the proper way.
tiene todos los medios para que eso salga así.
They have all the media, the communication media of the whole country, you know, the newspapers, the radio, the television, everything. And that's why it's going to turn out that way.
Y es que fíjense, si somos el 3% de la población que él dice no estamos con él, y entonces ¿de qué se preocupa?
So he says there's 3% of the population that's not with him. So what is he worried about?
¿Por qué destruir a un 3% si tiene todo?
Why would he want to destroy the 3% if he has everything?
Entonces, eso quiere decir, tiene miedo,
So that means that he's actually afraid.
le preocupa.
He's worried.
Quiere infundirnos el miedo, pero también el odio que él destila, porque se baña de odio y quiere que nosotros nos odiemos entre nosotros y nos matemos entre nosotros. Y eso no va a suceder.
So he has a lot of hate and he wants people to be afraid. He wants to divide people through hate and fear.
Nos va a costar o le va a costar al pueblo salvadoreño, pero ya vivimos esa situación y no queremos repetirla.
It's going to cost us a lot, but we've already lived through this in the past and we don't want to repeat it.
Yo les puedo decir, no me gusta hablar de mí, pero desde los 16 años me organicé para cambiar, para transformar ese país, para ser parte de las transformaciones de ese país.
I don't like to speak about myself, but just to let you know that since I was 16 years old, I've been working, I became organized in the popular movement to work for justice, to transform the situation.
Y mi organización fue campesina, fue ir a la corta de café a enfrentar al oligarca.
And the way I was organized was to go picking coffee, and then we had to stand in front of the coffee plantation owner, the oligarch.
Que nos pagaba 1.50 de colón, que eran como 20 centavos de dólar hoy en día.
Who paid us only $1.50, a colon and 50 cents of the colon, which is about 25 cents of the dollar for a day's work.
Y que ese oligarca podíamos hacer 100 libras y nos decía que eran 50 libras.
And we had picked what we knew was 100 pounds, and he would weigh it falsely and say that's only 50 pounds.
Entonces nos robaba la mitad.
So he even, on top of that, stole half of our salary.
Eso es una simple vista, la desigualdad por la que hemos pasado en ese país.
So we live this inequality. Very
Eh,
simply.
El egoísmo, ¿verdad? La falta de distribuir esa riqueza en los pobres.
The selfishness and the lack of distributing the wealth of the country.
Y si para eso fuera poco, también el aporte de la sangre de los salvadoreños. En mi caso, una masacre que fue de mi cantón, sacaron a mi madre, se la llevan y también la asesinan con 23 personas más.
So not only this kind of lack of justice in terms of working, but also the massacres. My mother was taken out with 23 other people who were all massacred, including my mother.
Y una hermana desaparecida, la menor que mí.
My younger sister disappeared,
Y bueno, un hermano que ese sí murió en combate.
and I had a brother who joined into the combat, into the struggle with the guerrillas, and he was killed.
Entonces decimos nosotros, y todo eso para tener un abusivo hoy,
And all this that we've experienced to have another abusive dictator,
quizás no será la generación de nosotros la que va a cambiar esto, pero tenemos que trabajar para que otra generación promueva la cultura de paz, de diálogo y de transformación.
maybe it's not going to be our generation, maybe the next generation that will continue to work, but we want to inspire them to work for peace and for justice.
Porque nuestro aporte y el aporte de ustedes ya ha estado ahí en esa cuota de trabajar para transformar.
We've all put in our part in El Salvador, and all of us here, all of you all here in solidarity. And that has to continue.
There are 2 questions online. Would you like to-
No.
Okay.
Before we go to questions, you've just heard a little bit about what it means to be someone who from the age of 16 has lived with the kind of harm and horror of repression, and someone who from the age of 16 has been part of this movement of resistance. And those voices have triumphed, and those voices have been set aside. And I think with Bukele, we'll hear a little bit also. I mean, we've talked to people who support him. And so the voices of opposition to Bukele are not the majority at the moment, but they're growing. And part of them coming here to share the story is to talk to other Salvadorans and to talk to people in this country to say what you've heard about Bukele, his popularity, which has some reality to it, but it's based on tremendous amounts of repression. I mean, we have a lot of Trump supporters. Trump was elected president of the United States with millions and millions of people. And so there's a popularity that, you know, you can control and you can control. And so these voices are all the more precious in our organized communities. One of the things that we would like to do before we go back to the questions is really to invite people financially, in addition to the solidarity that all of you have expressed over, some of you here over many, many, many decades. But we really want to invite people, if you're willing to make a financial contribution that can support the work of Cryptis and support the work of US El Salvador Sister Cities. Those of you online, you can see the notice for tonight. There's a little network for good. You can click right on that and make a donation. People writing checks can write checks to IPC, which is a nonprofit, tax exempt, and the money all goes to El Salvador on this, and also with some consideration for Cambridge and Arlington, we'll figure it out. But I think really we want this money to go to the reason for our existence in Cambridge and Arlington, which is solidarity with the people in El Salvador who are facing a very different moment. You know, with the military, it was so clear, right? You translate? With the military, it was so clear. The military by the United States supported, and the people. Here with Bukele, the message is different. It's more complicated. And so, but you know, they have talked about what it means to have come to the United States and spoken so honestly. about the situation. What will happen when they go back to El Salvador? So I think it really behooves us to put El Salvador back on the map and just at the moment inviting people to make a pledge, make a donation.
And you can also go to the, what do you call it?
The QR code for El Salvador Solidarity. So I'm going to just say that, and then we'll take a few more questions and answers.
So I want to go next to Pat's questions online. I think that was what's from. Sorry, let me double check.
And I think
Patty, excuse me. So Patty had kind of a combo question here, and Rachel, you'll translate the question, right? Thank you so much. So Patty said, what is the current U.S. involvement with government/military in El Salvador? And then the second part of that question was, are people migrating out of El Salvador? If so, where do they go?
Entonces, ¿cuál es la conexión entre Estados Unidos y El Salvador ahora? Y si están emigrando, saliendo de El Salvador.
Bueno, esa es como el resultado de todo esto que hemos hablado. Es que los jóvenes no tienen oportunidad, ¿verdad? ¿Qué oportunidad puede haber si ir a la universidad, si ir a la escuela, si movilizarse, significa que lo pueden echar preso o que se lo llevan?
So many youth are, of course, afraid to stay. If they go from one place to another, they could be picked up from the bus or from the street. And it doesn't serve them in terms of their career if they're put in prison.
Entonces mucha gente joven está migrando, está
So many
viniéndose
youth
a
are
Estados
leaving.
Unidos. El riesgo es grande por el camino que tienen que transitar, pero prefieren buscar un coyote que quedarse esperando allí a que lo lleven a la cárcel.
It's a big risk for them to leave and to find a coyote, a human trafficker, to bring them up to the border.
Y el que no tiene para el coyote, agarra una caravana y se viene en caminar.
And if they can't pay a coyote, then they go with a caravan.
Entonces, alguien nos decía, ¿y si esto hubiese pasado 7 años después, qué sería El Salvador? Sería un desierto.
So somebody said, well, if this had happened 7 years ago, what would happen in El Salvador? It would be a desert.
Sería un país sin gente joven.
It'd be a place with no youth.
Pero hoy lo está logrando. Con todo eso, la gente, en vez de buscar quedarse allá, hacer la vida en el país, pensar en proyectarse, ve que no tiene oportunidad.
So many youth are saying there's no way I could imagine staying here and planning my life and having a future. So I just have to risk it and leave.
Entonces,
Para Estados Unidos.
sí, para Estados Unidos la mayoría.
Most of them come to the US.
Entonces la conexión hoy con El Salvador, con la solidaridad, es por un lado denunciar esto, ¿verdad? Conocer esto y buscar formas de que se conozca esta verdad. Porque mucha gente no lo conoce, no lo sabe, y por la misma pandemia que hubo, no se va allá.
So those of us who are in solidarity, our job is to understand this and to denounce it, to share the information. Because in the last several years, people haven't been able to travel to El Salvador and have been witness to the situation.
Entonces se vuelve nuevamente necesario activarnos con otras personas y hacer alianzas para buscar esos esfuerzos que nos permitan no desarticularnos, sino encontrarnos nuevamente.
So we need to reconnect and with all the people from before and find new people to build alliances, build bridges, and make sure that this information is shared.
Así que tenemos que promover las delegaciones de aquí para allá.
So we want to promote delegations from here to El Salvador.
Para que vengan y cuenten qué vieron, cómo
So you
vieron esto.
Come back and tell people here what you saw. ¿Y cuál es la relación entre Estados Unidos gobierno en El Salvador?
Bueno, la relación de Estados Unidos gobierno con El Salvador, ya les dije, no hay embajadora de Estados
So the
Unidos.
government of the United States with the government of Salvador, it's a strange connection. There is no actual ambassador or charge d'affaires.
Y es que el embajador que llegue tiene que someterse a para que le dé el permiso de estar ahí.
So the ambassador has to be under the control of the president in order to have permission to be there.
Entonces, por eso es un encargado de negocios, porque él se encarga de los negocios, de relacionarse con la empresa privada, con las inversiones y no hacerlo con él directamente.
So it's like a charge d'affaires who is, they're just for business reasons, works with the business community, not with the president.
Además, él dice que él manda, pues, y él no necesita de nadie más porque él.
He says
vaya.
he rules and he doesn't need anybody else.
I wanted to know, say, if you wanted to add any comments to what you were in.
José, que puede, puede
Ah.
agregar, si quiere.
Vaya, José, te tocó.
No, lo digo bien.
Can we put-
No hay una embajador que está avalado, acreditado por el presidente, y eso quiere decir que el presidente también puede declararlo non grato y sacarlo.
Sí.
Yeah, Lorena is right in the sense that if an ambassador is named, Bukele has to welcome, and by the same token, if Bukele doesn't like him or her, he can simply dismiss the ambassador, and that would be a blow to U.S. diplomacy. Investing so much.
So he's avoiding.
Well, the U.S. is avoiding the fiasco of dealing to Bukele.
Yeah. Okay. Entonces Estados Unidos está evitando el problema de tener que arrodillarse
Sí.
frente a Bukele. Mhm. That's well put. Did everybody hear that on the Zoom? Yeah, Nancy.
I wonder if, I know you met with people, Salvadorians who are here under GPS last night. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what you learned from them here.
Algunos tienen TPS y algunos.
And Rachel, you want to just.
Yeah, so Lorena and Zulma met with Salvadorans here, some of them with TPS and others who are residents here. I'm not sure how many of them have all their documents, but there was quite an interesting exchange, if Lorena could speak about that. Sobre lo que aprendió.
Bueno, la verdad que los salvadoreños que están aquí, con los que nos reunimos, están bien conocedores de lo que está pasando en El Salvador. O sea, y dieron testimonio de casos que tienen familiares allá detenidos.
So the Salvadorans, pretty much all of them are well connected with people in El Salvador, their families, and they know what's really going on. And several of them have had experiences with family members being taken as prisoners.
O sea, comprobamos que no estábamos hablando falsedades.
And so we proved that to ourselves and to them that we're not speaking untruths, we're speaking the truth.
Porque ahí mismo dijeron, miren, eso es cierto, está pasando esto y bueno, se quebró un par de gentes ahí, ¿verdad?
Woman who told her
Emocionalmente.
story broke down in tears because her daughter's father has been taken prisoner.
Y dijeron un caso de 2 jóvenes que ya habían logrado la residencia y fueron a El Salvador a caer presos allá.
So they gave the example of 2 young Salvadorans from Los Angeles who went to visit, and they were picked up as if they were gang members, and they had their green cards and were put in prison and couldn't get back in time to keep their residency.
O sea, todo lo que les había costado lo fueron a perder en una visita.
So they went to see what was happening in their wonderful country they hadn't been able to return to, but now they have documents and they lost it.
And also, we learned that same as in El Salvador, there are many people that still believe in what Bukele is saying and doing, and they have hope still. Escuchamos testimonios de una, 2 personas. We heard the testimonies of 1 or 2 people that have traveled to El Salvador, and they are amazed how safe they feel walking at night. So that's the popularity of Bukele. So it is what Kathy was saying earlier. Yeah, so many of them were saying that unfortunately this government, the government of El Salvador, is promoting hate among Salvadorans. And what they wanted to share with us was that they really would like to have this type of conversations, dialogues, and not having like spaces, like, unfortunately, they don't have spaces to talk about the reality and to provide arguments and facts of what Salvadorans are facing right now. But the president is promoting hate, and that's why many Salvadorans are fighting among each other. So that's something that we heard yesterday. See?
I'm from Brazil. We have a game.
Okay, can you repeat the question? Oh, sorry.
And the last information of an elections, again. And Bolsonaro said he will get re-elected.
Let's just say it again for the.
So less than 2 weeks.
So our friend here who's speaking is from Brazil, and she says, you know, Salvador, it's Bukele, Bolsonaro, and he has declared he's going to have elections in 2 weeks. There are elections in 2 weeks, and he's declared he's going to be reelected.
And I am in contact with the Brazilians who live here in Boston. Who think Bolsonaro is great.
And our friend here says, I'm in contact with Brazilians who live in Boston, and they think Bolsonaro is great.
And there is a big role that the church plays.
There's a big role that the church plays
In favor of Bolsonaro.
in favor of Bolsonaro.
The evangelical church maybe. So I went to El Salvador, a month ago, and I saw the spread of the evangelical church.
So our friend here, what's her name? Suzanne says that she just went to El Salvador a month ago, and she saw the evangelical churches there in El Salvador.
And that I see Brazil for the last 40 years, the rise of the evangelical church
This,
that was brought to South America, to Latin America, by the evangelical church from the United States.
the same as in El Salvador, in Brazil during the last 4 years, these evangelical churches have arisen, and they were brought there by the evangelical churches from the United States.
Very conservative.
Very conservative.
Division
To promote division
and to promote hate.
and hate.
Because there is the Catholic, the evangelicals, and the communists.
So divide the Catholics, the evangelicals, and the communists.
And the Brazilian population here can vote in the presidential election. And some of them are voting for Bolsonaro again, they said. So what I'm saying is, what is the evangelical church that's playing in El Salvador to keep Bukele out?
So,
And to make a re-elected Bukele, like we are in danger of re-electing Bolsonaro now.
so Brazilians here can vote.
I saw this, big faith in Salvador with the Catholic Church and Monsenor Romero and all of the other ones, including the ones assassinated like him. And there was in Brazil also the, grassroots
Mhm.
with Bob and Beto and all of those that took church to one step to the campesino side.
We should have had you come up and just speak.
And what I see there now is like, where are the Catholics in El Salvador playing in the election and the evangelicals, are they on the same side of things? So
Yeah.
this interests me a lot, how
So this-
faith plays a role.
So just to sort of summarize, the situation in Brazil is where the evangelicals are playing a big role. And the question for Lorena is, what's the role of the evangelicals in El Salvador? Because Suzanne said that when she was in El Salvador, she saw the Catholic Church plays a very progressive role, and Monsignor Romero is the icon.
Yeah.
Do you want to come in?
No, in the past, with others. So the question
Okay.
is, where is the Catholic Church?
So the question is today, we know that the Catholic Church has played a very good role, and what is the role of the evangelicals today? Is it similar to what's going on in Brazil? And the Catholic Church. I'm sorry, I can't repeat the English. It's hard for me to translate. We should have to come up and speak directly on the camera. For the next person who's speaking, please come and speak to the camera.
Bueno, la verdad es que es complicado esto porque en El Salvador las iglesias evangélicas juegan ese papel no favorable.
So it's complicated because the evangelical church does play this kind of a role that's not favorable,
Y son muy conservadores.
very conservative.
Y de todo tipo, porque ahí andan mormones
And there are Mormons
que andan desplazados haciendo ese trabajo.
who go off doing their work.
Y también tenemos brasileños que tienen iglesia que se llama Pare de Sufrir.
We have a Brazilian church that says stop suffering. That's their name.
Ajá. Y tenemos de todo, desde los proféticos que dicen que pues ya se va a terminar el fin del mundo
And we have the prophetic ones who
Que hay
said the
que-
end of the world is here
y que hay que orar
and we must
para
pray
salvar el alma.
to save your soul.
Entonces, todos esos son seguidores de Bolsonaro también que tenemos ahí en El Salvador.
We have Bolsonaro people there in El Salvador.
La Iglesia Católica, lo que es la Iglesia Católica comprometida, que es la de base, es con la que logramos nosotros trabajar y andamos haciendo el rescate de la memoria histórica, haciendo las conmemoraciones.
So the Catholic Church that we work with is the Catholic Church of the base communities, and we work with all these church people to rescue our historic memory and keep alive the work from the
Es
past.
con la que logramos hacer nosotros esos encuentros intergeneracionales para que no se pierda el sentido de la lucha.
And we have intergenerational gatherings so that the youth understand and learn about the history and we don't lose that sense of where we've come from.
Pero yo, verdad, con mi corazoncito también en Brasil, creo que vamos a ganar, ¿verdad? Sí, con Lula.
But my heart says, actually in Brazil, we are going to win with Lula.
Eso no es lo que va a pasar en El Salvador, porque este tipo se va a reelegir.
That's not what's going to happen in El Salvador because this guy is going to be reelected.
Ajá. Y esa es una esperanza para nosotros.
And this is the hope for us that Brazil will be different. Do we have time for one?
Well, actually,
Oh.
A comment, if I can, on what we've been saying. We face the same problems in the United States, except here, the evangelicals and at least the Catholic hierarchy are united. So this is a problem that we face all over the world. And again, it's something we all have to figure out how to stand up to.
Okay, so it sounds like we're gonna take our last question and we'll take it from Beth. But that was the last person. Sorry, before Pat had posted in the chat here.
We can include Pat in.
Okay, so from Beth and Pat, what are some of the sectors or groups that are organizing to support democracy against Bukele? Is it possible to do this work openly or is that dangerous? And of course, that's in addition to Criptes and US El Salvador sister cities. And then to add to that, how has Criptes had to change their work or way of working under Bukele?
¿Cuáles son los sectores o grupos que están organizando para apoyar la democracia contra Bukele? ¿Es posible hacer este trabajo abiertamente o es peligroso? ¿Y cómo funciona Criptes y Ciudades Hermanas? ¿Y cómo han tenido que cambiar su trabajo o su manera de trabajar?
Y lo vas a contestar.
Ustedes. ¿Cómo?
No lo quieren contestar.
Yo. Oh, yo.
Sí. Esta pregunta no la quieres contestar.
No quiero.
No, pero tú no la quieres contestar.
De Criptes.
Bueno,
She's
Criptes,
saying that I have to answer it. I'm going, no, but I don't work with Criptes. Okay.
Criptes sigue haciendo el trabajo organizativo, el trabajo de concientizar. Estamos trabajando con jóvenes, promoviendo los derechos, con las mujeres.
So Criptes continues doing the organizing in many different sectors, the women, the youth.
Estamos promoviendo emprendimientos para que haya como esas pequeñas iniciativas generadoras de pequeña economía de las mujeres.
So we have little crafts and things that can generate a little bit of employment and money. So people are learning how to make things. I don't know, emprendimientos como collares.
Sí,
Yeah. Economic initiatives, yeah.
artesanías y
Handicrafts.
entonces nosotros vamos a seguir haciendo este trabajo.
We're going to continue doing this work.
Y quien quiera unirse con nosotros para promoverlo, pues bienvenido.
And if you want to help us, please come and join with us.
Esta hoy es la lucha de los pueblos.
This is the struggle of the people.
Y entre más alianzas hagamos, entre más conexiones hagamos, entre más encuentros hagamos, vamos a encontrarnos.
More alliances, more meetings together, more unity, the better we will all do.
Pero creo que debemos de abrazar de verdad estos procesos, que son de los pueblos.
But what we need to do is really put our arms around this process, the work of the people.
Así que la tarea de la solidaridad sigue en pie de lucha.
So solidarity continues forward.
Y también
Pero ¿cómo han cambiado su trabajo de CRIPTES por la represión?
No, nosotros no lo hemos cambiado. Nosotros hemos reforzado el trabajo en conocimiento de derecho.
We really haven't changed our work at all in spite of the repression. What we've done is make sure that people understand what are their rights
Promoviendo la cultura de paz,
and the culture of peace,
los diálogos,
dialogue,
los foros como estos,
meetings like this where we exchange ideas.
y haciendo encuentros intergeneracionales, o sea, los más grandes con los más chicos, ¿verdad? Con los más jóvenes que comprendan qué es lo que está pasando en El Salvador y por qué pasó eso.
So the intergenerational meetings and understanding.
Y no es fácil porque muchos jóvenes nacieron después de los acuerdos de paz. O sea, no vivieron la guerra, no saben qué es eso. Y si no se los contamos bien, entonces los vamos a perder.
Because of course the youth of today were born long after the peace accords and they don't really understand the history in their own experience.
sí, esto lo,
Yeah. Zulma's going to finish up here.
no, just to say that, yeah, there are many organizations doing work against Bukele, and there is one, ¿cómo se dice? Front that has different social organizations, which is called el Bloque Popular de Resistencia y Rebeldía. No, Bloque,
Popular de resistencia. De rebeldía.
ajá,
Es de resistencia, de rebeldía popular.
ajá, Bloque de Resistencia y Rebeldía Popular. And it has more than 35 social organizations that are going to the streets and going to marches and asking the government to stop human rights violations and violating the constitution and all the corruption that he's doing. And also there are other groups from the right wing that also are organized and they are joining the marches as well. And of course, those are not unified yet. I mean, the groups from the right wing and the left, of course, because their visions and the ideology is different. But for instance, last September 15, the day of Independence Day in El Salvador, there was a huge march organized by social organizations, including el Bloque de Resistencia y Rebeldía Popular, and different organizations that are led by people from the right wing. So there is, there are different groups organizing and going to the streets to demonstrate against Bukele.
I think that's a perfect way to come to a close. If we could hear just a round of applause for their words and for the many people that they work with in El Salvador. We also want to particularly a little shout out to Mario in El Salvador. And to think about all the people who are on Zoom and people who are here. One of the things that's been so powerful, I think, for so many of us has to do with that even with all the violence that's been increased in El Salvador, the organized communities, our sister city communities, continue to be the centers of organizedness without gangs, with full health care, with 100% literacy and housing and self-governance. And so when we invite people to be part of delegations, it's an opportunity to see organizing in reality. Emily, others in this audience have been to San Jose de las Flores, and it's an extraordinary thing. Our young people go and they can't believe how an entire community would be organized around care for one another. And so it's an inspiration for people who are living with certain kind of repression to also be living with some community. So we continue to invite people. You're online and you want to join us in a delegation, you can send back to us. Just really, this has been an extraordinary evening. I think for so many of us to actually hear the realities of what's happening from voices of people who are not being bowed by that, who are not being silenced by it, but by people who are speaking out. So thank you all for coming. Thank you to the church again. And thank you to our comrades on Zoom.
We'd like to get a picture if people would put their cameras on here on Zoom. And then we can get a
If our
picture on
friends-
Zoom and a picture here.
If our friends on Zoom would like to put their cameras on, if they're comfortable doing so, we'll take a picture. I think
Oh,
Mario,
Marius isn't
Mario,
working.
Mario, no, Mario is working and he's going to help us do it. Thank you so much, Mario. That was my message to Mario.
So thank you so much. Have something to eat and don't forget the coffee. Buy cashews, buy coffee. Feel free to talk with each other.